"You're not even pregnant, Cassidy. Stop pretending." That's what Toby said as I stood there. 2 lines on a test still trembling in my purse, my body aching, my voice gone. And across the room, Ilara smiled, not with warmth, with satisfaction, like she'd finally watched the scene she'd been scripting all along. No one stopped him. No one asked if I was okay. Not even when he pushed me. They said I tripped. They called it dramatic. They offered napkins, not help. But I had receipts. I had silence sharpened into evidence. And one day, I stood up and said everything out loud. If you've ever been called a liar when you were only asking to be heard, drop a comment number 1. If not, consider yourself lucky. Type 0. Because sometimes being disbelieved isn't the worst part. The worst part is realizing they wanted you to disappear. I hadn't even wanted to go to dinner. That morning, I sat on the edge of our bed, still sore from the night before, holding a half-folded cardigan that no longer fit the way it used to. In the mirror, my stomach curved ever so slightly, a quiet promise I hadn't dared put words to. I'd been holding on to this secret for 2 weeks. No announcement, no excitement, just silence. Not because I didn't feel joy, but because I didn't trust what would be done with it. The last time I shared too early, I lost more than a heartbeat. I lost dignity. Toby had laughed then. Not the joyful kind, short, clipped, the kind that landed like judgment. Maybe it was stress, or something you made yourself believe was real. He said it as if I'd imagined the ultrasound, the appointments, the ache. I remembered curling up in our upstairs bathroom for 3 hours afterward, towel wrapped tight, face pressed to porcelain. That was the day I stopped telling anyone anything. So when I saw Ilara's name flash across my phone that week, followed by an invitation, smiley faces, and a suspiciously chipper, "Are you glowing or just hiding?" I felt the familiar pull in my gut. I should have known she'd be there before I even smelled her perfume. She arrived fashionably late, in a white jumpsuit that caught every flicker of the fairy lights strung along the fence. She moved like a spotlight followed her by choice. The moment she spotted me, she zeroed in with a high-pitched gasp and that slow, syrupy grin. "I brought something for you," she whispered, looping her arm around my waist too tightly. The pink gift bag was glittery, obnoxious. The tag read, "For your future, maybe baby." She leaned in close enough for her words to sink past my skin. "Just for laughs. You know, women our age love to overcompensate." Laughter bubbled nearby. I didn't know whose. I tucked the bag beneath my chair, without looking at it again. My fingers itched to crush it. As the evening dragged on, I stayed near the drinks table, not touching the wine, not touching anything. I could feel Ilara watching from the periphery, circling like a cat that already knew where the mouse would run. At one point, Toby made a show of offering me a glass of red. I declined. His mother tilted her head. "No Merlot? You're usually my partner in crime." "She's been acting delicate," Toby offered smoothly, eyes never leaving mine. "Probably nothing. Cravings, maybe?" I wanted to leave. I should have left. Instead, I stayed frozen, one hand brushing against my purse now and then, checking, confirming. The test was still there. Not because I needed it, but because I hadn't let go. It had stayed with me like proof I wasn't ready to say aloud. That was my mistake. Because when the purse fell, the test slipped out like a betrayal. Gasps, a sharp intake of breath. I bent to grab it, but Toby moved faster. He held it between 2 fingers, like it was something he'd just plucked from the trash. "This isn't new," he said, voice suddenly flat. "She's been carrying it for weeks. Don't read too much into it." And that was the moment everything stopped. I felt my body sink inward, heat rushing to my ears. I didn't speak. Couldn't. The silence in the space around me felt alive. I turned and walked toward the hallway, ignoring Alara's dramatic sigh behind me. The staircase curved softly into the second floor. A rug at the top was slightly curled at the edge, something Toby had mentioned once to his mom, casually, like a setup in a stage play. I paused at the landing, chest tight. Behind me, footsteps, then a hand on my shoulder. I didn't need to look. There was a moment, less than a breath, where I thought I could hold my ground, but instinct moved faster than reason. My hand dropped, brushing instinctively over my stomach. I felt the soft press of fabric, and then I was moving. I don't remember falling in steps, just motion, my foot catching the edge of something, my weight shifting, the floor leaping up at a cruel angle. I landed on my hip with a searing jolt. My elbow cracked against the step below, then silence. Above me, from the balcony, Alara's silhouette sharpened against the chandelier light. She didn't scream, she didn't move, she smiled. Her wineglass remained perfectly upright. I stared past it, eyes catching a thin line above, a crack in the ceiling I'd never noticed before. It splintered the light, jagged and reaching, like the house itself was watching. I wanted to speak, to name what had just happened, but all I could do was breathe. Shallow, sharp. Toby appeared moments later, playing his part. Concerned, controlled. "Babe, you okay?" He crouched, eyes darting toward the guests now approaching. "You must have tripped," he offered quickly, too quickly. "That rug's always been loose." I said nothing. When he lifted me, I let him. When we left, I let him lead. When the car doors closed and the world narrowed to silence, I placed a hand against my belly. A whisper, a wish, a silent apology to something I hadn't even said aloud yet. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me most. After the hospital, after the discharge papers, after the polite nods and clipped words from staff who didn't ask and didn't press, I walked into our house and felt nothing. Not numbness, not grief, just nothing. The hallway light buzzed faintly above me. I slipped off my shoes mechanically, not because I wanted to get comfortable, but because it felt like something a functioning person would do. Toby had dropped me off at the curb and driven off without looking back. No questions, no apologies, not even a performance of concern, just, "I'll check in later." The door clicked shut behind me. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The counters were clean. The toaster was unplugged. Every object sat in its designated place, polished and quiet. I hated how nothing ever looked out of place in this house, even when everything else was broken. When I finally moved, it was toward the office, a room I hadn't entered in weeks. Once, it had been painted pale yellow, meant for a nursery that never came to be. Toby had changed it to taupe for focus. Now it was his cleanest crime scene. I powered up the desktop and stared at the login screen. The blinking cursor reminded me of a heartbeat. I typed in my old admin password and watched the system boot. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but my body knew. My hands moved without needing direction. I pulled up the home security portal, the one Toby had installed a year ago for safety, but never showed me how to access. I opened the desk drawer. A pamphlet still sat there from the installation company. The customer ID was printed on the back. I called the number. The woman on the line was polite. Too polite. Within 5 minutes, I had a temporary login and a reset link in my inbox. I clicked through the archive folder labeled Backyard, March 18th. That was the night of the fall. The footage loaded in smooth silence. I saw Alara arriving, fashionably late, spinning like she always did. I saw myself, stiff near the drinks table, barely blanking. At 7:03 p.m., the camera showed my purse fall. At 7:04, the screen went black. Not fuzzy, not glitched. Just off. 2 full hours were missing. When the footage resumed, Toby's uncle was folding chairs, and Alara was nowhere in sight. The timeline didn't just skip, it had been tampered with. I leaned back in the chair, air locking in my chest. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't emotion. This was evidence. I exported the file, gap and all, and dropped it into a newly labeled folder. If they come for me again. Then I opened another drawer and pulled out my journal. I hadn't touched it in months, but now I noticed something odd. A pink ribbon. I never used ribbons. When I opened to the marked page, it landed on the entry from the week I lost the first baby. The ink was smudged, slightly warped, as if thumbed by someone else. Words I had written in pain were now familiar in Ilara's mouth. That brunch 2 years ago, when she laughed at my silence, at my refusal to drink, and said, "Well, someone's resetting the clock early." That wasn't a fluke. She'd read my pain before she performed it. I felt sick, not from grief, from rage. Have you ever watched someone take your pain and turn it into their performance? The kind of betrayal that wears a smile and speaks in your own voice? If you've been hurt by someone who used your vulnerability against you, drop a comment number 7 below. Now, let's see what I do next. I stood, moved to the kitchen, poured half a glass of water, and left it untouched. My eyes drifted toward the security router in the corner, still blinking green, still pretending to protect. I walked back to the office, opened a blank document, and began to write. Not to heal, but to remember. Not to process, but to record. Dates, words, gaps, statements, laughter, smirks. Everything that no one else would care to write down. I wrote it for myself. Because no one had ever protected me like I now intended to protect my truth. The next morning, I woke up to an alert on my phone. Motion detected. Front door, 6:12 a.m. I checked the feed. Toby. He stood there for a moment, keys in hand, staring at the camera with a neutral face. Then he walked away. No knock, no message, just a reminder. He was watching, but this time, I was too. There's a strange power in being anonymous. You can speak louder, bleed sharper, and people finally listen. Not to who you are, but what you survived. It was past midnight when I posted it. The house was silent. Even the ice maker refused to hum. My laptop screen cast a faint glow across the kitchen table as I hovered over the publish button. I didn't shake. That surprised me. I had titled it carefully, Gaslit by Blood. I uploaded a redacted screenshot of the receipt, Toby's purchase from a medical prank site, clearly labeled Fake Ultrasound Kit. I attached a blurry but damning audio clip where his voice oozed skepticism. How do you really confirm if a pregnancy's real? And I ended with one paragraph from my journal, the one Ilara had quoted like it was her own wound. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The story was already recognizable. I clicked post. The platform was a private forum, a tight-knit space for women surviving psychological abuse. No trolls, no cruelty. Just a room full of invisible echoes waiting for someone to break the silence. Within 20 minutes, the post had over 3,000 views. By morning, 14,000. The comments bled fast. I thought I was the only one. She just wrote my life. My sister did this too. I stared at the screen, cup of tea going cold beside me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. This wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. At 8:12 a.m., Clear Voice Collective shared the post on their official feed, captioning it, "We don't know her name, but we know her pain. We stand with her." And then came the firestorm. Ilara posted at 8:46 a.m. a carefully curated blog post titled, "When Family Turns Fictional." The tone was perfect. Just enough vulnerability to seem real, just enough blame to be venom. "She's brilliant at performance," Ilara wrote. "Always has been. I wish her healing, even if she's rewriting history to get there." I read it 3 times. Not because I needed clarity, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. One line in particular stood out. "I just want peace, even if it means letting go of people who share your blood." She knew what she was doing. She always did. I took a screenshot, saved it in the folder titled "Spin Attempts, Greater Than Fail One." The comment section turned electric. Someone posted, "That candle gift? Passive-aggressive much?" Another, "She's the kind of sister who reads your diary and quotes it back to you at brunch." The words stung and soothed all at once. Strangers saw her clearly, something I'd fought years to put into focus. Someone even uploaded a screen recording of Ilara's Instagram highlights. "She's deleting posts," the caption read. I watched the highlight disappear in real time. Just like that, the performance began to crack. One user wrote, "If your sister's fictional, why are you so busy defending yourself?" I didn't reply, but I saved it. I created a subfolder that afternoon, receipts I didn't have to collect myself. And then came the message. No name, just, "I know why she laughed." A second later, another, "She never told you everything." Then a third, "If you're ready to hear the real story, meet me." It was from a burner email, but I recognized the writing. Lennox Hale. He was Ilara's ex. They'd been together for nearly 2 years. A miracle for her, considering how little she trusted anyone with longevity. One day, he vanished. We were told he was unstable, but I remembered the look on his face the last time I saw him. Tired, guarded. Like a man who knew too much and had said too little. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened the front door and stepped outside. It was drizzling, the kind of rain that misted instead of falling. I let it touch my face like punctuation. I needed to feel the weight of this moment, the one where silence cracked wide open. I went back in and refreshed the page. 19,000 views. A new comment. "This is about that Lockwood family, right? I swear I've seen that sister on IG Smug." Another. "Who buys a fake ultrasound? This is sociopathic." And another. "I don't know who you are, but you're not crazy." Thank you, I didn't smile. But I felt something settle in my chest, like a window had opened and air was finally coming in. I closed the laptop, walked upstairs, opened the linen closet, and pulled down the pink bag Ilara had gifted me days before. I'd stuffed it there, behind old pillowcases. It was still glittering, still ridiculous. I opened it. Inside was a candle labeled "Fresh Start" and a card that said, "May you find the clarity you seek, sis." No signature, just that. I lit the candle, watched the flame grow, then I blew it out. Not yet. Downstairs, I heard the distinct shuffle of paper through the mail slot, a thud, then silence. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but a magazine lay on the mat. Folded inside it, a local newsletter I never subscribed to. The headline read, "Gaslighting, When Psychological Control Turns Criminal." One sentence was circled in red ink. Most abusers aren't sloppy. They're strategic. They bet on your silence. I slid the article into a folder labeled "Triggers They Didn't Mean to Leave Behind." Later that night, I opened my inbox again. One more message from Lennox had arrived. "She laughed because it worked. You were never supposed to see it." I sat with that line for a long time, not crying, not panicking, just steady. Then I opened my laptop again. 36,000 views. The invitation came in the form of a group text. Toby's mother wrote it like we were still family. Dinner at ours, just the core group. No drama, let's talk. No drama, as if that was a setting we could toggle off. At first, I considered ignoring it. I even typed out, "not coming," then deleted it, because I knew exactly what this was. Damage control. They were trying to wrap a bleeding wound in a silk napkin. I stared at the message for another full minute before replying, "Sure, I'll bring something." What I brought wasn't a casserole. I spent the afternoon before dinner pulling files into a folder. I labeled it "Open If They Lie." Inside, the audio of Toby's voice in counseling, the receipt for the fake ultrasound kit, the camera footage gap, the email to his lawyer about a contingency clause for faked pregnancies. I transferred it all onto a sleek silver flash drive. Then I backed it up to the cloud. And a second drive. And printed hard copies. Let them try to say I imagined it. By the time I arrived at the house, the driveway was full. I parked down the street and walked. The evening air was mild, soft gold light spilling from the windows. It could have been any other family gathering. Except I wasn't family anymore. Toby opened the door like nothing had happened. "You look well," he said, as if that wasn't an accusation. I didn't answer. Inside, the table was already set. 10 seats, only 8 filled. Ilara's was still empty. Of course she'd be late. She always liked a stage entrance. At my place setting, someone had carefully folded the cloth napkin into the shape of a swan. I stared at it longer than I meant to. We'd had the same napkin folds at the wine party the night of the fall. A detail that tried too hard to say, "Look how composed we are," even when everything inside was coming apart. Toby's mother tried to offer me a drink, her smile tight as stitching. I declined. She nodded, then said, "Sometimes trauma makes us misinterpret things." I met her eyes. Sometimes silence makes cowards of us all. The room went still for a second too long. Toby's father cleared his throat. "We'd like to move past all this, for everyone's sake." That's when I set the flash drive on the table. No words, just a tap of my finger against it. Toby's smile faltered. "What's that?" "Proof," I said. "Proof of what exactly?" he asked, voice now a touch too smooth. I turned to his father. "An email Toby sent to his lawyer 2 weeks before I told anyone I was pregnant. It asked how to restructure his estate to reduce liability in case the pregnancy was proven false." Toby stiffened. "And attached," I continued, "was a draft contract. Line 26. Should pregnancy be disproven or deemed illegitimate, financial obligation reduces to 0. His mother gasped. His father's jaw clenched. "Is this real?" I brought copies. I opened my bag and placed 3 envelopes on the table. The room felt like it had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. But I wasn't done. I took out my phone, unlocked it, and hit play. Toby's voice filled the space. Calm, cold, calculated. If she keeps lying, maybe a fall will make her tell the truth. Ilara had just walked in when those words echoed off the walls. Her wineglass dropped, shattered. She stared at me, mouth open, stunned for once into silence. Toby stood. "This is ridiculous. She's twisting things." I stood too, but my tone was calm. "I'm not here to beg. I'm not here for closure. I'm here because you don't get to rewrite my pain." For a moment, I caught the eyes of my youngest niece, seated quietly at the kids' table by the hallway arch. She couldn't have been older than 10. Her gaze was locked on me, not frightened, not confused, just focused, as if, for once, she was seeing an adult say something real. I turned to leave, already reaching for my coat, when Ilara's voice cracked behind me. "I told you not to leave proof!" It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a confession. It was panic. The silence that followed was louder than her scream. As I opened the front door, someone caught up with me in the foyer. It was Marla, Toby's cousin, the quiet one who always hovered in corners at parties. She spoke low, eyes not quite meeting mine. "I always wondered if something was off," she said. And then she stepped back inside. Outside, the air felt different. I breathed deeply for the first time in weeks. In the quiet, my phone buzzed. A notification from Clear Voice Collective. "We read your post. Would you be willing to speak? We'll protect your identity." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "I don't need protection anymore, but yes." The woman behind the desk looked younger than I expected. Maybe 28, maybe 40. Her eyes said both. "This is everything?" she asked, tapping the folder I had slid across the table. "No," I said. "This is what I'm ready to use." Amira Sloan didn't blink. She didn't smile either. She just nodded slowly and opened the folder, like she already knew what it would hold. Inside, printed screenshots, transcribed voicemails, time-stamped footage, the copy of the receipt from the prank medical site, the export logs from the security system, a notarized statement from Kristen, my neighbor, and a brief handwritten letter from Lennox Hale. That last one I hesitated to include, but I knew it mattered. "I don't need a trial by media," I said. "I need consequence." Amira looked at me with something dangerously close to respect. "You'll have both," she replied, "but I need to ask. Are you prepared for what happens when you go public?" I thought of Ilara's scream at the dinner table, of Toby's face when I said, "Proof." "I'm not afraid of being seen anymore," I told her. "I'm afraid of staying silent." She tapped the table once. "Then we proceed." We filed in the complaint that afternoon. I sat in the courthouse lobby, staring at a pot of fake ferns and listening to my own heartbeat while Amira submitted the documentation for formal legal review. Assault, coercion, intentional infliction of emotional distress, civil conspiracy. Across the room, a woman in a beige coat clutched a thick stack of custody documents. Another sat hunched over her phone, quietly crying. There was no drama here, no theatrics, just a line of women carrying proof no one had wanted to believe. I wasn't alone in this war. Kristen met us on the front steps. She had her hair back in a tight ponytail and wore sneakers that squeaked slightly on the pavement. "I signed the statement," she said without being prompted. "I'm ready if they call me." "You don't owe me anything," I said quietly. She looked at me then. "But I owe the truth something." That night, I went home and sat with the documents again. Each one was a bruise given shape. I laid them out like cards on the floor. Receipts, timestamps, voice memos, that cursed pink gift bag. Have you ever collected every moment of your pain? Not to dwell on it, but to finally defend yourself? That quiet clarity when you realize, this time, you're not staying quiet. If you've reached that turning point, drop a comment number 9 below. Now, let's see what else I discover. I lit a candle, yes, that one, and watched the flame without flinching. The air smelled like citrus and lies. Before I could open my draft, I checked the original post again, the one that had started this storm. In the comments, I noticed a small change. Someone who had once written, "Sounds like she's just dramatic," had quietly deleted their post. Another account, one I didn't recognize, had messaged, I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. It wasn't much, but it mattered. Then my email pinged. From Lennox. No subject line. Just a message. There's one thing Alara made sure you never knew. I want to tell you, but only in person. I stared at the screen. My instinct told me this wasn't a trap, but it was something dangerous. I met him the next day at a small cafe 2 towns over. The kind of place with chipped mugs and 3 different kinds of milk. He was thinner than I remembered, softer, but his eyes were sharp. I should have come sooner, he said. I didn't respond. He reached into his coat and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. Inside was a copy of a medical power of attorney Alara had once tricked him into signing. She was going to fake a hospitalization to get access to my records, he said. Said it was part of a bigger story she was working on. I looked up. A story? He nodded. About survivors. She wanted to blur the line between fiction and pain, she said. My skin went cold. Lennox went on. She told me she'd been rehearsing grief since she was a kid. Said if you perform it well enough, no one asks if it's real. Back at home, I updated the folder. New subfolder. Invented trauma pipeline. The next morning, the courthouse emailed confirmation that the suit had been filed. A case number had been assigned. I forwarded the information to Amira, Kristen, and to myself. Less than an hour later, a message came in from Amira. They underestimated your silence. That's why they'll lose. I saved it as a sticky note on my laptop background. Then, I sat down and wrote a press-safe version of the story, one that removed names but kept the truth intact. The abuse, the denial, the manipulation. I titled it simply, They Didn't Think Twice. And at the bottom, I added one line, but I did. And I wrote everything down. I didn't expect the house to feel so quiet. Not in the lonely way, in the complete way, like something had finished echoing and the walls had finally exhaled. It was the first morning after the article went live. They Didn't Think Twice had over 300,000 views in 12 hours, picked up by 4 advocacy pages, reposted by 2 small news outlets. My inbox wasn't just full, it was vibrating with strangers' stories. Pain pinged in paragraphs from women I would never meet. Sisters, cousins, co-workers, a few men too, but none from Toby, none from Alara. They had gone quiet, which was louder than anything they'd ever said. I deleted the article from my desktop, not because I regretted it, but because it had done what it needed to do. Truth, once released, didn't need babysitting. Instead, I opened a new blank document. This one titled only Statement. I didn't know what I was going to say yet, but I knew why I was saying it. I closed the laptop. Later that day, I was back at the courthouse, not for filing this time, but for finalization. The divorce. One more signature, and it would all be legal. One name unlinked from another. Clean cut. Toby showed up in a charcoal blazer, 3 minutes late. His lawyer offered a stiff nod to mine. Toby didn't look at me, not once. The only words he said the entire time were, "No, Your Honor." He signed like he was approving a shipment. I signed like I was locking a door. When we stepped outside, he lingered by the stone steps. I didn't slow down. I didn't owe him even a glance. But he said one thing, low enough that only I could hear. "I hope you're proud of what you've done." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Pride wasn't the point. Truth was. Back at home, I poured tea and sat at the dining table. The light caught the empty photo frame I hadn't removed from the hallway wall. One that used to hold our wedding picture. I got up, took it down, and slid in something else. just a page torn from a notebook with one word in black ink. Still. It wasn't for symbolism. It was for me. For every version of myself that had been pushed, silenced, rewritten. I was still here. Later that night, I scrolled through an old folder on my laptop. Letters never sent. Inside, one labeled, "To Alara." I opened it, read it slowly. It was too long, too hopeful, written in the kind of voice that still thought she'd one day apologize. I deleted it. Then I deleted the entire folder. The next day, I drove out to the lake, the same one we once planned to bring a child to, for floating ducks and lazy picnics. I hadn't returned since the miscarriage. It had taken me over a year to come back to this place, not to grieve, but to reclaim it. I brought with me a stone, smooth, gray, palm-sized, engraved with a single word, still. I knelt where the grass met the shore and placed it in the dirt. No prayer, no goodbye. Just a quiet, steady release. I wasn't erasing what happened. I was closing the chapter that never belonged to them in the first place. That afternoon, I met with the director of the Clear Voice Collective, Margaret, mid-60s, kind eyes, iron voice. She didn't ask me to relive anything. She just said, "We think your voice could help others find theirs." I nodded. "I'm not polished." She smiled. "We're not asking for polished. We're asking for real." 3 days later, I stood behind a microphone at their retreat center, tucked in between pine trees and silence. Around me, other women, some broken open, some barely audible, some blazing. I wasn't the loudest, or the most damaged, or the most brave, but I was the one still speaking. "I used to think survival meant staying quiet," I began, "but silence is just where truth goes to gather strength." There were no cheers, just nods, soft ones, sharp ones. One woman mouthed, "Thank you." That night, I sat in my living room, blanket over my legs, candle lit, not citrus this time, just lavender. My blog was open on the screen, not the anonymous one, the real one, with my name. I began typing. "They called it a fall," I wrote, "but it was a beginning." I hit publish. And then I whispered to the quiet, "Let them come. I'm not hiding anymore." I don't have to hide anymore. After everything they tried to bury, the staged fall, the fake smiles, the twisted words, I'm still standing, with my real name, my real story, and a piece they could never steal. I've learned that justice doesn't always come quickly, but it comes to those who face the truth head-on. Dignity isn't granted by belief from others. It's in the act of holding your ground, even when no one stands beside you. And those who thrive on manipulation and cruelty may shout the loudest for a while, but they always fall silent when the truth catches up. What about you? Have you ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, only to lose yourself in the process? Share your story in the comments about the moment you were hurt or the moment you chose to fight back. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice speaking up for others to realize they're not alone. And if you want to keep exploring stories of survival, resistance, and healing, hit subscribe. Because the next story might be exactly what you need to take your next step.